Did you know that clowns paint their face makeup onto eggs and then register them so no one else can steal their look? Well, I didn't. And when I did find out just about a week ago, I decided to dig a little deeper into the process. And what I found was shocking. I fell into a world of chaos, color, and confusion. And honestly, at the end of my research, I felt a sort of loss. Seeing what the clowns of the past were, and comparing them to clowns of the present, well, it's a bit disheartening. Clowns could have been so much more. But alas, here we are. Today, I wish to tell you all about clowns. So join me as I discuss my findings into the history and the emergence of the modern clown. Technically, clowns originate with fools and jesters, but that's such a big topic that it needs its own video. Maybe one day. But we do have a sort of definitive starting point for modern clowns. You see, they trace their roots back to the Commedia dell'arte, or in plain English, the Italian comedy. Rather unsurprisingly, it developed somewhere in Italy, although its exact beginnings are rather vague. Some trace it back to Roman carnivals, others just to general Italian theater traditions. But the first ever recorded Commedia dell'arte was performed in 1551. And these plays were generally performed outdoors by a set of professional actors who wore costumes and masks specific to their role. As troops around this very specific playstyle began to form, they began to travel across Europe. Notably, the Commedia was actually one of the first, if not the first, theater traditions in Europe that allowed women. And so a lot of the women with these troupes became some of the first female professional actors. You know, because back then they just have kind of men play women rather than women playing women. Getting back on track, by the 17th century, what had started as a mostly improvisational performance for the Commedia evolved into a more structured form. There were set scenes, and there were specific recommendations on how they should be performed. And there were stock characters. 4 main types of stock characters, if you will. These were sort of archetypes for the characters in the plays to fall under. Each of these 4 had specific outfits they would wear, and they would all embody certain exaggerated emotions or ideas that audiences could instantly understand and latch onto. Now, these 4 stock characters were the Zanni, who was a sort of foolish servant. The Vecchi, old, rich men who were generally a little miserly or gluttonous or something like that. Then there were the Innamorati, who were generally young women, they didn't have to be, and they were young, upper-middle-class lovers. And the final 4th one is the Il Capitano, who was a kind of self-styled captain, a braggart, a rather loud individual. And so, comedic plays would be played, well, with this set of characters as guiding principles for their actors. However, as these troupes for the Commedia dell'arte traveled around Europe, they evolved, they changed, and various stock characters spawned offshoots, which would become their own distinct stock character. And the most important one of these is the harlequin. From these stock roles, various sub-roles emerged, but one stood far above the rest in terms of importance: the harlequin. An evolution of the Zanni, the harlequin is the key to everything. Now, it's believed that the harlequin was first introduced by an Italian fellow by the name of Zan Ganassa in the late 16th century, though it was Tristiano Martellini, another Italian actor, who truly popularized the character. And after Martellini's death, the harlequin was cemented as one of the essential Commedia dell'arte stock characters. And the harlequin was instantly recognizable by his red and black checkered costume and his mask. He was a light-hearted servant like his zany predecessors, and was often interfering with his master's schemes. Whether intentionally or by accident, the harlequin often found himself in a lot of trouble. And yet, with quick thinking and physical agility, he managed to escape the consequences of his shenanigans relatively unscathed. You see, what truly set the harlequin apart from the zany, what made him a stock character in his own right, was the harlequin's origins and the traits that he inherited from it. You see, the name harlequin derives from a mischievous devil character found in medieval passion plays known as the harlequin. Now, the harlequin was an emissary of the devil and was depicted as a black-faced spirit who roamed the countryside with a band of demons, hunting down sinners and dragging them to hell. From this infernal origin, the harlequin inherited two of his most defining traits. Number one, his physical agility. You see, the harlequin's performances were emphasized by acrobatics and quick, nimble movements. And number two, his trickster nature. Unlike the more bumbling zany, the harlequin was a clever and cunning character, always finding a way to turn a bad situation away from himself or to his advantage. As the harlequin became a staple in the Commedia dell'arte, his role was further refined and adapted to suit stories as needed. Though he was frequently cast as a servant of the vecchi, pantalone, or as a servant of the il capitano, and the harlequin was often entangled in a romantic pursuit of the Colombina, herself an evolution of the innamorati. In his attempts to woo the Colombina, the harlequin would inevitably foil his master's plans and land himself in various misadventures, only to slip away at the last moment, unscathed and perhaps profiting from the situation. The Harlequinade was developed in England between the 17th century and the mid-19th century, and it was a more debased version of the Commedia dell'arte. Okay, well, that's to say it relied more on physical humor, slapstick humor, to get a laugh out of its audience. And this humor was performed by the 5 main stock characters. Now, that's not to say there weren't other minor reoccurring characters. There was, like the iconic bumbling policeman. But these 4 were generally the stars of the show. The Harlequin, the protagonist. He retained his agility, cunning, and mischievous charm, always scheming to win the love of the Columbine, while outwitting his miserly master, the Pantaloon, so that he could elope with her. The Pantaloon, typically the Columbine's father or guardian, attempted to keep the Harlequin away from the Columbine. He was a greedy and foolish figure, embodying villainous authority, with traits of lust, gluttony, and miserliness thrown in just for good measure. The Clown was a simpleton and another servant of the Pantaloon. He was a bumbling bumpkin who tried, and often failed, to aid the Pantaloon in keeping the Harlequin and the Columbine apart. The Columbine. Unlike her Italian counterpart, the Columbine was not just a love interest, but a clever and sometimes manipulative young woman. She often conspired alongside the Harlequin to outwit the Pantaloon. The Periot. He was another servant of the Pantaloon, characterized by his naive and his melancholic nature. The Periot was often hopelessly in love with the Columbine, and was a frequent target of the Harlequin's tricks. And in almost every single play, he was to have his heart broken when the Columbine inevitably chose the Harlequin over him. Now, the Harlequinade was originally mimed. It was silent, relying on music and dance and elaborate physical performances in order to tell its story, although later some minor bits of dialogue were worked into it. But the Harlequinade always had a huge focus on its elaborate visual spectacle. Originally, these types of plays were used as a more light-hearted conclusion to a night filled with more serious theatrical performances. However, as time went on, the advancements in stagecraft and special effects transformed the Harlequinade into more and more fantastical spectacles of magic and illusion that further captivated audiences and sometimes even granted them their own night of performance. And in the midst of all of this came a man who would change the Harlequinade forever. That man was Joseph Grimaldi. And quite frankly, he's a figure that deserves his own Louis Wayne-style video. So perhaps another day I'll have to cover his life in more detail. But needless to say, Grimaldi took the clown, who was a drab, stupid servant, and turned him into a flamboyant, chaotic, larger-than-life figure. You see, by this time, the Harlequin had evolved into a more refined, romanticized character, leaving a large comedic void in what was originally a very comedic performance. Grimaldi's clown filled that void in the performance as he shifted the clown from ragged servant attire into extravagant, colorful costumes with tassels and ribbons, diamonds and circles. This new clown and the chaos, the energy, the humor he brought with him was a huge success. Audiences loved it. And by the 1880s, the Harlequinade had faded into obscurity. However, the clown did not. Circuses can be traced back to the Romans. However, their circuses were more gladiator fights and horse racing. Kinda awesome, actually. And thinking on it, oh goodness, those Italians are almost entirely responsible for the clown's rise. Or at least in supporting the clown's growth as a entity, an idea. The modern circus, though, owes its creation to one man, a certain Philip Astley. In Lambeth, London, Astley developed an amphitheater dedicated to equestrian performances, showing off rather impressive horse riding tricks and techniques. And the cool thing was, he did this in a circle, while other, horse rider tricks and stuff, they'd be done in a line. That was his big thing. He could do these tricks in a circle. But he didn't stop with just horses, like so many did. He gathered jugglers, tightrope walkers, acrobats, and, yes, clowns into his show. And while these figures were unknown to the public, Astley was the first person to bring them all under one roof, into a cohesive spectacle. What would become the circus as we know it today? Eventually, this idea spread across the Atlantic, setting the stage for a different type of performance, the American circus. In 1793, a Scottish equestrian named John Bill Ricketts brought the modern circus to America, and naturally, clowns followed. But these new American clowns, they were built different. They performed in larger groups, leaned even further into physical comedy, exaggerated their costumes to an absurd degree, and interacted with the audience more than ever before. In short, they were louder, flashier, and in some ways, more real than their British predecessors. Truly an Americanized version of clowning. And as this tradition evolved, 4 distinct styles of clowns emerged, 2 major and 2 minor, we shall say. The major clowns, the white-faced clown. These clowns trace their lineage back to Joseph Grimaldi and are heavily inspired by his performances. He is their progenitor. They are typically clever, authoritative leaders of a clown troupe, or an alley. That's what a group of clowns is called. Their makeup is pure white, covering their entire face and neck, leaving no skin exposed. And their costumes are the more elaborate and refined of their alley, distinguishing them from their underlings. The Red Clown, or the August Clown, is credited to Tom Belling Sr. And the Red Clown took on the role of a bumbling fool. They were the butt of every joke, being constantly pranked by their white-faced superiors. They could be seen as an evolution of the period, actually, sharing his naive, melancholic, and helpless nature. These were the clowns that were always getting pantsed, pied, or in some way humiliated for gaffes. The Minor Clowns. Hobo Clowns. These clowns are dressed in tattered, ragged clothing with some amount of makeup. They embodied the struggling, down-on-their-luck wanderer, which often evoked both humor and sympathy. Character clowns. So these clowns are modeled after recognizable societal archetypes, taking on roles like police clowns, firefighter clowns, butcher clowns, and so on. They're just exaggerated versions of these figures for comedic effect. With these new variations, clowning in America cemented its own identity, blending old traditions with a uniquely bold, chaotic, and theatrical flair. The American flair. Oh! I didn't know how to fit this in, but I really want to talk about the Toronto clown riots of 1855. It all started when a troupe of American clowns from a traveling circus made their way into a brothel. And somehow, someway, lost to time, these clowns started a fight with members of the local volunteer fire department. And the clowns won and kicked all of the firefighters out of the brothel and claimed it as theirs for the night. Naturally, the firefighters did not take this well at all. They and more of their buddies ended up storming the circus in retaliation. And what started as a grudge match between the clowns and the firefighters quickly spiraled out of control into a full-blown riot against the entire circus. The police were there, however, they were in the same union as the firefighters, so they didn't really do anything to stop it. And it was utter chaos. It got to the point where the mayor had to step in and stop one of the firemen from splitting one of the clowns' heads open with a fire axe. That was just a lovely little event in clown history I really needed all of you to know. Now, more or less, we arrive at present time. The 2016 clown sightings and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Maybe it's due to these sightings, maybe it's due to something else, but nowadays, it seems like most times I see a clown, it's some scary, awful, terrible killer clown, or creepy clown, in some slasher flick. I mean, this is horrific, in all sense of the word. You know what? If you were to go out and ask people what they think about clowns, I would wager that a good few of them would say that they're creeped out by clowns. And sure, maybe clowns occasionally show up at a birthday party or some event to give kids face paint and make balloon animals for them. And maybe some of those clowns keep the clowning traditions alive. And sure, there's organizations like the World Clown Association and Clowns of America International. These exist. Hey, as do the clown eggs, those also exist. But it's just not the same. Modern clowns are sad shadows, pale echoes of their past glorious selves. Sure, we still have our internet clowns. And clowns are still depicted in various forms of media. I get it. They show up here and there. But they're mostly jokers or scary clowns. But they just aren't the same. I mean, I guess where do modern clowns go from here? Do they completely transform into symbols of evil? If so, that's a tragedy. a wonderful cycle has been broken. From the zany came the harlequin. From the harlequin came the clown. But from the clown, what? There's no successor to carry on their legacy of chaotic foolishness, of being clever, of being tricky, mischievous. Perhaps this cycle breaking is because clowns never became a serious character, and there was a void of comedy left that needed to be fulfilled. Hello, Editing Sam here. It just occurred to me while going through this video that the horror clown is technically a more serious take on the clown, so the cycle could very well continue. It's just not obvious, at least to me, where it picks up. There's no buffoons going out in brightly colored outfits and making fools of themselves. Okay, maybe TikTokers, but that's the key. They have to be doing it themselves to entertain, to fill a comedy void. So if you happen to have any ideas, please let me know down in the comments, because I really don't know. So this makes my closing remarks kind of moot, but we'll cut into a random point here for you all. Here we go. Rise up and claim their birthright. And maybe, just maybe, you can be it. Maybe I'll have to be it. I don't know. Plug everything, Sam. Hey, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'd also appreciate it if you were to like and subscribe, because that does wonders for the algorithm. I guess I should probably start saying that more. Oh, and also, if you ever want to talk to me, you can join my Discord. I watch it, and things happen sometimes. I even voice chat in it occasionally. And if you're feeling especially generous, please consider going to my Ko-Fi and throwing me a few bucks. But goodness gracious, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers!